Hey friends, welcome back to another episode of the H Panel, the show where I bring on guests from all different backgrounds to talk all the things mental health. I'm your host, Harry Potvin, and today I have the pleasure of being joined by Rachael Jaye. Rachael is known as the Connection Coach. As a certified cuddlist and connection specialist, she focuses primarily in supporting men's mental and emotional health, with a specialization in helping their relationships. Rachael was so fun to talk to, and I wanted to thank her again for coming on and having this discussion with me. Also, she sent me an email notifying me about this, but I cut the last piece of this interview out where she told us about her links, and I'll just put her updated links down below. The ones that she said in the episode were since renewed. Also, before we get started here, I just wanted to say thank you to everyone who listens to the show. We're actually now 66th in Canada, top 100 for mental health podcasts. I don't know if we'll still be there when this episode gets posted. The chart updates daily, but man, I never even considered top 100 to be an achievable thing. I'm just a dude in my basement who likes to talk to people. I've never really kind of thought of it anything more than that. So to say that I'm top 100 in Canada is pretty freaking cool. And I couldn't have done it without you guys. So if you're watching the show, if you know of people who watch the show, if you just know of the show, you don't even have to be listening right now, but if you know of the show, I just want to say thank you. Thank you so much for your support. You guys are a big part of why I keep doing this. And it means the world to me that we're top 100. I don't know. I think that's pretty cool. Now, before we get started here, guys, please like, comment, share, subscribe, give 5 stars if you're on a podcast platform. Share with someone who might need to hear this episode. It's a really great one, and I can't wait for you to listen. I'll talk to you all very soon. Have a beautiful day. Peace. I'm Harry Potvin, and this is the H Panel. And we are good. Rachael, thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you for having me, Harry. I'm excited.
So before we get too into our conversation today, I wanted to get to know you a little better. So what got you inspired to start being the connection coach?
Well, do you want the shorter version or the longer
Give
version?
me that long version.
Okay. So I used to have more of a corporate job. I was an engineering designer for a utility company, and I had always wanted to be an actor. And ultimately, I lived in California. I'm born and raised in Northern California. And ultimately, I left everything there behind and moved to New York to pursue acting. And I enrolled in a 2-year conservatory program, which ended in the spring of 2017. And I mean, you're in Canada, so this doesn't relate as directly, but that was just on the heels of a pretty major divisive election that we had here in the States.
Oh, yep.
And yeah, um, and I really felt a pull at that time to do something to try and like counteract all of the division and isolation and marginalization that was going to and did come out of those results. And essentially, the day after the election, I was wandering through Times Square to go meet a friend for dinner, and I was just feeling devastated. I didn't know that things would go the way that they did. And in Times Square, I'm not sure if you've been to New York before.
I
Have
haven't
you?
yet. It's on my bucket list.
Hopefully, things will go back to normal at some point, and it will be the spectacle that it is meant to be. But in Times Square, there are so many people doing photo ops and different, sort of people dressed up as characters, different things for photo ops. So you get pretty used to walking through and just sort of blinders. And I was walking through to go meet my friend, and I saw a woman who had a sign she was holding that was offering free hugs. And you see that a lot. But her sign below the free hugs said something to the effect of, now more than ever, we need to connect with one another or we need to support one another, something like that. And I had walked past her and it sunk in a little bit and I thought, yeah, that's what I'm feeling. And so I turned around and I went back and I hugged her. And we hugged for like 20 to 30 seconds and just there was a physiological change. And I felt calmer, I felt less alone, I felt like, okay, we can get through this kind of a thing. And that was sort of like the first breadcrumb, if you will, to me ultimately becoming a certified cuddlist. And I'm not sure if that's something that you or your listeners are familiar with, but um, essentially, it's a platonic touch practitioner. And what we do is we hold space for clients. And a lot of time that includes platonic physical affection. And I call it the sort of bridge between massage therapy and traditional talk therapy. Because if you go to get a massage, you're getting that, basic human need of touch met. However, your massage therapist is likely not going to be holding space for you to vent about whatever stress is coming up in your life, in your day. There's no talking. And then on the other side of that, with a traditional talk therapist, they're legally prohibited from touching you.
Hmm.
So if you need to cry through something, if you are working through, so many things that we work through in therapy that can bring up a lot of emotion and you could really use a hug in that moment, you're not going to get that from a talk therapist. So this container is really that middle road. And so I became a certified cuddlist in November of 2017, and I've been doing that for the last few years. And then the pandemic hit, and no more contact-based services, right? We can't be around anybody. So out of that was sort of born what I'm doing now as the connection coach, which is essentially using everything that I have learned as a cuddlist over the last 3 years and the tools, because there's really so much more than just the physical touch component of those sessions. It's about allowing somebody to feel seen and to feel safe and not judged, and be able to express things that they don't feel like they can express with other people in their lives. And so there are certain techniques that I have learned through doing that work that I have also applied in my own life and totally transformed my relationships. And so that's what I'm using now in an online sort of space. So that's sort of the journey.
Awesome. So when you told your family and friends that you were going to become a certified cuddlist, what was their reaction?
That's a great question. To be honest, I didn't tell people for a long time because I was aware that there would be feelings around it. And I started out with telling friends as I got more comfortable and as I got more experience doing it to make sure that I really felt like this was the right thing for me and I felt comfortable. Um, and then the way that I ended up telling my mom was I had her watch with me when I went back for a visit, a TED Talk that was given by one of our longtime cuddlists, Dr. Yoni Alkin, who in San Francisco, and talks about the power of the hug and all of these things that are why I do this. And so I sort of like primed her by showing her that TED Talk. And then that was sort of my lead into like, yeah, this is what I do. And as moms are, she was concerned about the safety aspects, but um, I have a very rigorous screening protocol. So it's understandable that people have those concerns. But yeah, I think that's the main thing that people tend to be sort of concerned about.
Hmm. Has cuddling, like, has it being a cuddling specialist been around for a while, or is that like a new because I've heard it before, but it wasn't until this pandemic that I've heard of that.
Mm. Yeah. So Cuddlist is about, I think, about 5 years old now, that specific company. But cuddle parties have been around for, I think, decades. And then there are some other smaller organizations that also do it and have certification processes, but I believe cuddlist is the most known.
Hmm. Yeah. Okay. I man, there's so much power in a hug. Like I I've had friends who like they don't open up. They hate opening up to people like about their feelings cuz for whatever reason they love having a wall up. The minute you hug them, it's like that wall just gets shattered. I don't know what it is in a hug that allows someone to go from stone cold to bawling their eyes out for 10 minutes, but I love that so much.
I'll tell you what it
Oh,
is.
let's do it. Yeah.
It's the oxytocin.
Mm.
So that's a hormone sort of similar to dopamine and serotonin that gets released when after like 20 seconds, minimum of 20 seconds of healthy physical touch with somebody. So it doesn't even have to be a hug, but if you're holding hands with somebody, oxytocin can be released in just that, 20 seconds of holding hands with somebody. And that's the same hormone that gets released, with infants through breastfeeding. It's a bonding hormone. It's literally called the cuddle hormone. Um, so yeah, there's actually something scientific that's happening in that hug that allows that physiological response to happen.
No idea that it was actual science. I thought it was
Yeah.
just like, that's crazy. Cuddling science. That's awesome.
It's pretty dope. Yeah.
That's another thing I wanted to get at because this pandemic, and I've mentioned this a lot of times, so my viewers are probably like, "Oh, guy just rants about the same thing." But
Repetition is key.
yeah, exactly. I'm trying to pound it in the
Yeah.
viewers head. But one thing I hated about this whole lockdown thing, and I get it, but like at the same time, it's frustrating. Is like we're being like taught to fear touch.
Mm.
Like people are like, stay 6 feet apart, wear your mask, don't even look at like. There have been laws in
Oh,
some places where it's like you can't even look at the person, like don't make eye contact. And
really?
yeah, like in Europe, there was like a law.
You can't make eye
Well,
contact?
I don't know about now, but there was a suggestion where it's like if you walk by someone, don't look down. Like
Oh.
right? So these little connections you have. So first of all, eye contact is like the
Mhm.
basic like interaction with a human being. Then you've got like just arm over the shoulder,
Mm.
handshakes, daps if you're friends, like high fives, like pat on the back, everything. It's gone. Like we don't even get these little spurts of
Mm.
oxytocin going on. And we're teaching young people like these first of all, people like my age and above, we're good. Like for the most part. Like we know what life was like before this pandemic. We're good. We know how to like we know that hugging and everything's fine. But these younger kids who are like developing, like you got your 5 year olds, your even 10 year olds, like these younger children are being told, do not even look at this person. Like,
Mm.
don't connect with people. And they're going to
Mm.
grow up and think,
Mm.
I can't look at people. I can't touch people. It's like, what are we going to do? What are we going to do?
Yeah, it's horrifying. It's really horrifying because it's interesting with the pandemic because I think in the first couple months there was sort of this sense of like universal community and we're coming together and we're really going to work together to get through this and neighbors taking care of each other and all this stuff. And now it's gone on for so long that now we're going this direction where that fear is really being built upon and bred. And yeah, like you're saying with the kids growing up, not not being encouraged to connect with other people because of that fear, and that fear-based thinking has gotten us to where we have become before the pandemic, which is such a scary and awful place. And a lot of a lot of what I have seen with my clients, who have come for cuddlist sessions come from childhoods where they didn't receive healthy physical affection from their families.
Mm,
They just didn't have parents who were touchy-feely, they didn't have people around them as they were growing up who like gave them warm bear hugs and were just cozy like that. And so my hope that now with kids not being able to get that sort of, nurturing affection from other people in their lives, that parents are being more cognizant that they need to be more of that space for their kids, because that's so much damage, growing up there, um, and not being able to express and cope with certain things that go on comes from not having that sense of safety and nurturing as a child. And, there's no judgment there. Some people are just, as parents, not the huggy, touchy feely type. But it's so much more critical now because of those conditions like you were just describing, that, okay, even if that's not who you are as a parent, like, please try harder, because that is so detrimental to kids growing up in these conditions and not knowing, you know.
Yeah, yeah, no, and like sometimes even if your parents aren't super touchy feely, you still get it from like your friends.
Right,
I
exactly.
don't mean like your friends aren't gonna bear hug you, but like they're gonna give you high fives and pats on the back, like the basic touches. Another thing,
But even your grandparents, I mean, kids now, like, they can't get hugs from their grandparents, so they're not getting that nurturing familial sort of like safety nest sort of a thing from anybody if they're not getting it from their parents.
well, and it's in our DNA, right? Like if you, and I say this like if you don't believe in evolution, just don't even listen to this part. Like I like believe in what you want. I'm not judging, but like if you look back at the apes, and I've mentioned this on this podcast before, if you look at a troop of gorillas or orangutans or chimpanzees or whatever, they're always touching each other. Always. They're communicating, they're like putting their hands in their each other's hair, they're like wrestling, they're
Mhm.
doing these things. So it's in our DNA to touch.
Yes.
Whether we want like you can't push that away because it's in there. It's coded in us. And like I don't know. It's one thing to be like antisocial, like that's okay. If you really don't like touch, that's completely fine. But even just being around people, like having that energy of a person next to you, that's being taken away too.
Well, and I mean, this no eye contact rule is news to me. I hadn't heard that. That's That's awful. I mean, because as it is, I'm somebody, okay, I'm from Northern California, so I'm a social person. I come to New York, and, in New York, it's like this rule that you don't make eye contact with people on the subway. It's like everybody minds their own business, like, don't be that weirdo. Well, listen, I'm that weirdo because I am always trying to make connections with other people. So I'm the weirdo on the train that's like, I'm not on my phone as much as possible, but, like, I don't listen to podcast music because we have so much technology available to us that it's hindering us from connecting with people in real time. So it's a rule of mine that I do not go out in public with any sort of headphones on unless I'm going for a jog, which, truth be told, it's been a while. But otherwise, like, I'm not, I don't read a book on the train. I don't, like, I might check my phone, but I'm not on it consistently because I want to allow space for people to make eye contact and for me to be able to, like, see them so that people feel seen, right? And it's been a lot harder with the masks because even like going for walks out on the street, I'm somebody who, again, tries to make eye contact and smile at people and say good morning or whatever. And that's been taken away. And so walks are not enjoyable anymore. But there is a rare occurrence, and I would like to share a story with you if
Please.
that's okay.
Yeah.
I had this beautiful moment happen, I think 2 weeks ago. I had traveled up to the Bronx and back, and it's 3 trains either way, an hour commute, hour plus commute. And so, again, as I do, I'm trying to make eye contact with people because it's what I do. And, sometimes people like glance over and they can see me smiling from here up,
Yeah.
so it's like,
Yeah. The
then I
squinted
might,
eyes.
yeah, it's like gotta try extra hard, and then that's even weirder, but it is what it is. Um, and so, I might get some sort of like smiles back above the mask, okay, great, great, great. I went all the way up 3 trains, back 3 trains, not a whole lot. And then I got off at my station, I was walking through, and I was almost to the stairs. and I passed this man, and I looked over at him, tried to make eye contact, and I think he just sort of like, it was a delayed sort of like he looked over at me and we had a brief moment of eye contact and I smiled, and then I walked past him and that was it. And then I heard something, and here, I mean, there's noises everywhere. So it could have been somebody talking further down in the station or somebody up by the street because I was close to the stairs at that point, but something compelled me to turn around because I felt like he might be talking to you. So I turned around, and this man had his arms out like this, and he was saying something, and I didn't want to assume what I thought he was saying, and so I asked him, "I'm sorry, what?" And I asked him like 3 times because it's muffled with the masks, and so I wanted to make sure that I really heard him correctly. But when I finally was confident in what he had said, "Can I get a hug?" And I said, "Yes." And so I went and I gave him a hug, and we hugged for like, you know, probably close to a minute, and it was so lovely. And we pulled away, and he was like, "Thank you. That really, brought a smile to my face today." And I was like, "Mine too. I'm so glad that you asked me." And I said, "How are you doing? Are you doing okay?" And he's like, "Yeah, I'm doing okay." And it was just sort of like this awkward moment for a second where it's like, is he gonna ask for my number?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, yeah.
like
Are we about to
where
kiss?
yeah, like, where's this going really? Like, but it was just sort of like we were both kind of like not sure what to do next. And then he asked if he could get another hug, and I said yes. And so we hugged for another, probably almost a minute. And people are walking by. It looks like we're old friends and we just ran into each other. No, totally random stranger. And, we pulled away. And again, he was just like, "Thank you so much. That really made my day." And I was like, "Mine too. Thank you so much for asking." And then so we just sort of like slowly did the walk, linger away from each other, again, not knowing like, do we even introduce ourselves? What? And he was just like, "I'll see you around." And I go, "Okay." And then I left, he left, and it was just this beautiful moment of human connection. And, we had talked a little bit before we got on about me being woo woo. And, that's an area where I just feel like your energy matters. And for this person who I've never seen before to it's a very vulnerable thing to even ask somebody, or, to start a conversation with somebody that you pass on the street anyways, let alone for the first thing out of your mouth to be, "Can I get a hug?"
Yeah, that's
That's
immediately met with like, what the fuck?
right. And most people would. And so that's like next level vulnerability to ask for that right off the bat. But something about my energy indicated that I was somebody that he could ask that of. And so it was just such a beautiful moment. And it was right after January 6th with everything that happened at the Capitol. And
Mm,
so it's the whole climate is fraught with even more tension and fear. And, it was really just such a special moment that this person asked for a hug and there were no expectations. I kind of love that it didn't turn into something that could go further because there was no expectations on it. It was just a beautiful moment of two people seeing one another and validating each other's existence and sharing a moment of presence and empathy and connection.
hmm. I feel like if he asked for your number after, that would have ruined the whole thing.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. At the time, I kind of felt like, was this meant to be something? Should I go back? I don't know. But I also just felt this strong feeling of like, I think that was just meant to be this beautiful moment. So yeah, I agree with you now. At the time, I wasn't so sure.
Yeah, yeah. I didn't realize cuz I'm a huge hugger. Like I love hugs. And during the pandemic, I was always like, I'm fine. I'm fine. I'm good. Like we'll get through this. It's fine. And then my mom gave me a hug one morning, and I started tearing up. I was like, what the fuck? I hadn't been hugged. This was like September. I hadn't been hugged since before March. So I was like,
Mm,
Jesus. Like that's when I started
yeah.
realizing it's a real thing because I was like, I'm good. And that one hug from a person who I live with was like, oof.
Yeah.
Like it felt like I was pushed back. And oh God, it's the other thing is like when you're talking about touch, people immediately go, "What?" Because everyone associates the word touch with a sexual meaning.
Yes.
So you're like, "We have to touch more." People like immediately people are like, "Pervert?" No, that's not what I mean. I mean like a pat on the back or a high five. Like we got to get touching again. Like
Yeah.
take it as you will, but that whole idea that touch is only sexual, it just ruins it.
Yeah. And I mean, not without reason, right? Because we're in this really precarious climate. However, that's part of what I do in the cuddlist sessions, which is, re sort of there are different things, and this is why I use the term platonic touch practitioner rather than professional cuddler, because it's so much more than just cuddling somebody. There's a lot about consent education, but also, so that is a big part of it. But it's also in, learning that the ways that we touch people are not just limited to that physical, um, that sense, that tactile sense. The way that we touch someone also is through our eye contact and, being really present with them and not, looking to see who's walking by or walking in the door when you're trying to have a conversation or being on your phone. Yeah,
Oh, what was that?
exactly.
Sorry, I wasn't paying attention.
That's yeah. I mean, exactly, like, that's a way that you are touching somebody who's around you, and it's not touch in that literal physical sense, but, so eye contact is a way that we touch people. The way that we listen actively or whether we are interrupting or constantly interjecting or responding to react rather than to understand. Um, the ways that we communicate with people through technology is a way that we touch somebody. The words that we use, the tone that we use, these are all ways that we touch other people.
Mhm.
And it's just not in that traditional way that we think about it. But yeah, it's necessary that we need to expand that because this is all, sort of encompassing of how we connect with other people.
Yeah. Yeah, it touches more like a communication tool rather than
Yes,
that's
exactly.
what it should be looked at as. So when you were mentioning that when you started to get into cuddling and becoming who you are today, like that was no, sorry, I've got my dates wrong. You were saying that during the pandemic, um, like at the beginning there was a sense of community, right? Like which was great. And then we
Mm.
started getting back, and then you said started getting back to what it was before the pandemic. What started this whole lack of connection thing? Because it was happening before the pandemic started. The pandemic just kind of put it into like they put a highlight on it.
Right. Well, I okay. There's so many different pieces to this.
Let's go
um,
through them.
okay, great. Okay. Um, so a big part of it, okay, if we like let's go sort of broader and then work in more specifically, I guess. Um, globally, just in society, everything that's going on in terms of, me versus them, which is a mentality that we have had since the beginning of time, basically. It's you've got your tribe and your people, but anybody else we're fearful of. We don't know their motives, we don't know their agenda, like so that is just something that we have always seen in politics, in wars, in, all of these things. So that's already been in existence and driving disconnection. Um, but then also this technology piece is a big part of disconnect, which it's sort of like a balancing act because technology has done so many wonderful things for us. I mean, oh my god, where would we be during this pandemic if we didn't have the technological capabilities that we have right now?
Hmm.
It would I don't even want to go there. So, technology has like given us access to so many more ways to connect than we would have ever had. However, going back to what I said about people being on their phones constantly and being plugged into their devices constantly, it also when it's misused is a tool for disconnection because we're so busy. We also are in this time of like money is time and we got to hustle, we got to grind, we got to, success and multitasking. We got to do all these things that are going on at one time that we're not being with the people who are right in front of us. And so technology has also done a huge disservice when we don't set boundaries around the use of it. And living in a city like New York, where there's 8.5 million people, less now because so many people left during the pandemic. But, you know, you would think it's not that hard to meet people because there's people everywhere, but everybody is on their devices all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And, again, that example of being on the subway, you look around and everybody's on their phone or has earbuds in, and walking down the street, in the grocery store, in the gym, all these places people are plugged in constantly. And so they're not spending time with the people right in front of them, um, because they're so distracted by these other things, but also when they are, these a lot of these means are meant to connect you to people far away, like
Mm-hmm.
Facebook, the beginning of all of this like social media that's meant to connect you with people who are not close by. That's great. But now that's even turned into something where it's an opinion piece and it's, starting fights and bullying and, comparisonitis and all of these other things that have become so dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
So that technological piece is another piece of breeding disconnection. And then the other thing, which is, more specifically tied to what I do, is we have this loneliness epidemic, which I think stems from, some of these other things, but is also impacted by how we feel in our closest, most intimate relationships when we're not feeling seen. And for men, that is even more dangerous, as we see from the numbers. Men, like the suicide rate for men is 3.5 times higher than the rate of suicide for women.
Mm-hmm.
And that men are like 3 times more likely to depend on alcohol and drug abuse, to be as a coping mechanism. And so then we start to look at why that is. And there's so much there, um, as to why men end up feeling more lonely. Um, there have been reports and studies and things, and the highest number of individuals who report feelings of loneliness are married men with children. So it's like, it's surprising, but it's not.
Yeah, the last people you would think of, but then when you hear it, you're like, that kind of makes sense though.
Tell me why you think it makes sense.
Because you're busy with, providing for your family. You've kind of taken that whole, like, it's funny because in trying to provide for your family, you forget about the whole family aspect because
Mm,
you've got that tunnel vision to work, got that tunnel vision to make money, to compete against the other people in your business. Then you get home and you're like, I just want to sleep, I just want to take time for me. And then it's kind of, you add that to like the stress of raising children, the stress of paying all these bills. And I could be going, like, I could be wrong here, but like, this is just what I'm assuming, um just based on what I've seen. But like the stress of paying for things, the stress of raising a family, the stress of trying to move up in your job, you kind of forget about that whole touchy feely idea. Am I on the right track here?
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So what I would add to that is, so then we have this man who's in this circumstance and having all these things. Where does he go to for support? So for men, a lot of times, because men are not really encouraged to seek help.
Mm-hmm.
And this is part of, what I talk about a lot too, is the gender role conditioning and the impact that that has on relationships and intimacy. And if we go back and back and back to caveman times, like we're going back to like evolution in DNA, and men are hardwired to be the providers and protect and hunt and defend their tribe, right? They're not wired to like process emotions because that could mean death,
Mm-hmm.
literally. Um, and that has also, compounded over time, even through evolution, because in war, vulnerability means death. Showing a weakness means death. That will get you killed. So we keep moving forward, and that is still sort of hardwired. And when we look at how we continue to raise young boys, it's don't cry. If you fall down and skin your knee, throw some dirt on it, get a band-aid. But there's no cozy, like, oh, my baby, like, are you okay? How do you feel? There's no coddling of little boys the way we coddle little girls,
Hmm.
right? So from a very young age, boys are conditioned to not show emotion because they don't want to be called a girl. They don't want to be made fun of on the playground by their friends or be called, pejorative names. And there's this whole perception that, like, being um equated to girl-like tendencies is a bad thing, right? And that's changing now slowly.
Very slowly.
Yes. And, I think that the very young generations right now, like, uh, 0 to 6 maybe, are in a lot better position now to kind of be moved away from that. But that does nothing to help generations, ages older than that, because they've already been, fed with all this sort of conditioning. And so what that ends up doing is those little boys who were told not to emotionalize, and that vulnerability is weakness and weakness equals bad, grow up to be men who have a hard time emotionalizing or expressing what they need, when they need help, and really, like, letting that wall down. And so what happens when we find our partners is that female partner tends to become the one person. It's like, okay, I feel safe with you. I trust you. Now I can let my guard down. And so that becomes the one person that a man does feel like they can go to. But then in, the longevity of the relationship, if the relationship did not start out from a truly authentic place, which is one of the other things that I coach people on, um, to be able to, like, build a really strong foundation, then cracks in that connection will start to appear over the length of the relationship. And if they're not addressed, then they start to become big gaping holes. And what ends up happening is the husband, a lot of times, will end up not asking anymore for the things that he wants and needs, because that trust has been broken. Because the flip side of this gender role conditioning is what women have brought up to want from a partner, and that is someone who, I mean, not as much. I'm gonna make some sweeping
Yeah,
generalizations, so I
right.
know that this isn't, but, like, you want a man who makes the money, who's, gonna take care of you, and not that you can't have your own career, but, like, generally it's sort of adopted that, like, typically the man should be the one who makes more money in the relationship, to be that provider. And it goes back to that, like, caveman thing, like, the man's a provider, the woman is, like, the home nurturer person, right? Even if both are working, all that, but just basic, getting down to, like, nuts and tacks. So, brass tacks, nuts and bolts, brass tacks, that's where I was going. Um, so we get brought up watching Disney movies and seeing, Disney princesses where, Prince Charming comes along. And so that's the belief system that we grow up with. And then we have a lot of evolved women who say, I want a sensitive man, I want um someone who's not afraid to cry, and, da 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 da. But this is where it gets interesting. When you get really into what it is a woman actually wants, when she says, I want a sensitive man, oftentimes what she means is, I want a man who is sensitive to my needs. that's what she's really after. But in terms of a man who is comfortable with his own sensitivity, that's harder to swallow because as the relationship goes on and now we have kids and pressures become greater because we need more money, we need, shared parental roles and duties. And oftentimes that's not the case because men are still like being pushed to work harder to be able to provide. But now moms are working too, but they're still doing most of the household stuff. So then this crack becomes wider because partners are feeling like she's not doing enough to support me, he's not doing enough to support me, so that crack grows. But also, um oh, where'd it go? It just flew right out.
That happens to
Excuse me.
me all the time.
Well, I'll pause there for a second and see if you have questions or you want to add anything, and I'll take a sip of tea.
Yeah, so the one thing I really hope that that whole idea that men have to be providers and the like have to go out and make money, I hope that changes because I personally think I'd be a killer housewife.
That's amazing.
So I'm like all for it. My parents were like, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" I was like, "Housewife, man. I'd kill it. I'd clean shit. I'll raise those kids. I'll let my wife get that bread. I don't care. I'll stay home."
See, and that's great because you know what it is you want, and now you can authentically express that when you meet someone. And then that way it's about, managing expectations of the relationship too.
Yeah, like obviously I want a job, but like I just meant if like let's say she's got that corporate gig and she's making bank, and I'm like I don't know I'm working. I don't even want to make a like a hypothetical because I might insult someone, but like I'm somewhere lower. And it's like one of us has to stay home. I'd be like, okay, like, I'll stay home.
I
Sure.
got you. I
Yeah,
got
of
you.
course. Go get that bread, man. Treat me for dinner. I don't care. That's
Yes.
the other thing, right? Is like this is changing now too, but when I was cuz I'm not old. I'm in my 20s, but even when I was growing up in like teenager years and stuff, when you would take a girl on a date, you better pay that freaking bill. You better be like, "It's okay. I got you. I don't care how much money you have in that that bank account. You're paying." And now you go on dates and you're like, "Let me pay." And they're like, "I've got my own money." And I love that. I'm like, but some guys like there's still this idea like I'll go on a date and I'll pay. No, sorry. I'll go on a date and they'll pay. And then you'll be with your friends and they're like, "So how'd the date go?" I'm like, "Great." And they're like, "You paid, right?" I'm like, "No. She did." And then immediately it's like, "You're an asshole." So I hope that changes because I don't know. I feel like there's more equality in giving both the power to pay as opposed to like being like that man better pay. You know what I mean?
I do know what you mean. And it's a really good point to bring up too. And that goes into sort of a different track as far as just sort of like the dating sort of ritual, because there is a lot about that process that comes back to like how men and women are wired in terms of the courting rituals. And it's just something, it's like I have gone different ways, tried different things, and then reading other books and realizing this is just really kind of like the ritual. This is like the courtship dance because of certain things. And, again, that goes into like a whole separate sort of thing. But I think what it really comes down to, because not everybody is going to feel that way, right? Like some women really do want to say like, no, I got myself, or no, I'll take care of this. Or sometimes, it's about like, oh, you got me last time, I'll get you this time. So it really comes down to like knowing the person that you're dating, and knowing if that's truly what they want, or if they're doing it because they're expected to, whether it's you paying because you're expected to, or whether it's her paying because as a feminist, she needs to be able to take care of herself. So it still comes down to like there is a rhyme and a reason as to why some of these rules in the courting process exist. But in terms of like developing and establishing like a real potential partnership, but it just again comes down to like really kind of knowing your audience and knowing, what really are you comfortable with and what are they comfortable with. Um, yeah, how's that landing?
No, that makes a lot of sense. I agree that like I think what I mean more so is like just having giving people the option as opposed to you better pay that bill. I feel like
Mhm.
that's a lot
Mhm.
better. It's a lot nicer. Cuz like obviously some women like to be paid for, of course. Like that's I like it everyone has their own preferences, but just giving that ability or like getting rid of that societal expectation that the man has to pay all
Mhm.
the time. It's like that's
Mm.
really nice.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, and that's part of I think where there becomes a lot of breakdown between men and women and confusion because by all rights, feminism should mean that that is the way things go now, right? I mean, like, hey, girls, you're saying you're for equality, so why are you expecting me to pay all the time? Like, this is an archaic system. I thought, this was like part of the patriarchy is that I'm paying for you and now you owe me something, like all these underlying sorts of meanings that we give to certain exchanges, right? But then a lot of even feminist women will come back and say like, "No, if you're not treating me on a date, then like I'm a lady, sir. Thank you very much." You know what I mean? And so there's this like dissonance between again what we say that we want and what it is that we actually want. And and so moving forward back to it came back where I was going. um um you know once you've been in a relationship for a long time and there's probably kids in the picture, and if the man gets to a point where he's showing that sensitive side that supposedly she wanted when they first got together by saying I want a sensitive man, who's not afraid to show emotion and all of that, and has built that trust where has felt like okay, this is my person, I feel safe, but then over time that sort of fades. A lot of times that happens because he has shown that sensitivity and, come home and said, like, I had a really hard day at work. I was reprimanded by my boss, or, I lost this deal, or, something. Something just like had a hard day or has fears or concerns about something, or just I know that I said I was going to help you do X, but I feel so burnt out right now. Is it okay if I just like unplug and watch the game in the den for an hour or something? Like something. He asks for those things and he starts to be met with, I really need, like there's this reprimanding at home now. And a lot of times what I hear women joke about to each other is, I'm not his mom, you know? If he wanted his mother, if he wanted somebody to baby him, he should have married his mother. I have enough kids.
I've heard that about me before. That's been told to me. They're like, "I'm not your mom." I'm like, "I don't want you to be."
Right. But that gets and that's something that we hear a lot. And it's used as a form of like bonding between married women, but it's really detrimental because what it's doing is showing that your husband, your chosen partner who you committed to and, you know, built this trust and safety with, that you're not sensitive to his needs. He's showing sensitivity and trying to express it, like, as you were saying before, about those roles and those pressures with work and stress and all of that thing, and wanting to come home and sleep or, do something for themselves to unwind and, just sort of like decompress. They don't feel safe to express that to their partner anymore because they're getting that. getting met with that sort of judgment and mockery that basically their sensitivity doesn't matter because they have so many other things that they've got to deal with that are more important and they don't need a third kid, right? So like these are things that messages that get repeated which cause the husband to then really shut down because that was the one person because men are not encouraged to develop those deep emotional bonds. And sometimes they're developed with other male friends, but I don't think that that is, the majority of situations. And, therapy is super stigmatized, especially for men. And so it goes back to this lack of encouragement for men to seek support. And so once that one person is no longer their safe space, they shut down and they isolate and they do what they need to do and they show up to the things that they need to show up to, but they're not fully there because they feel invisible. And that's what happens a lot. And then that is what will lead to, these destructive coping mechanisms with different addictions, whether it be drugs, alcohol, porn, um, or even having affairs. Having affairs is not about the sex, it's about somebody seeing them and them not being invisible. But because men are so conditioned that sports and sex are really the only avenues where it's socially acceptable to express their emotions, to hug your buddies when you score a touchdown,
Ugh,
like,
sports.
yeah,
Ugh.
yeah, yeah, sports, like the pat on the butt. I mean, oh my gosh, that's okay if we're talking about sports, like,
I
like,
got I
yeah,
got my
good
butt
job,
patted
good
all the
job.
time in rugby. It'd be like,
Yeah,
"Good play, man."
right. But it's like, that's totally okay because sports, and same thing with like talking about, with like sex, same thing. Like you can be excited or you can be totally bummed out or upset if you didn't get laid last night or what, if your date didn't turn into an overnight date with, breakfast in the morning kind of thing, right? Like these are two topics that are socially acceptable for men to express emotion. And so it then makes sense that men tie their emotions to sex because sex is the most vulnerable position that a man could be in that's not war, let's say. But so that's sort of the language. And so if a man has an affair, and a lot of times, right? How often like do we hear this in movies or media or whatever, or with celebrity couples or anything? The husband has an affair and it gets found out, and the question always comes up, do you love her? And the answer is always no, right? I mean, more often than not, it's no. And they had no intention of leaving the family. They never leave. Very rarely do men leave for the person that they had an affair with, right? And it's because they have no intention of leaving the family. They love the family, they love their wife, but they felt seen for a moment by somebody else. And that's what's been missing. And literally, like, it just happens. And there, I personally do not have judgment about that because I understand why that breakdown happens and why there's that need and it's like what's going to happen when that feeling seen um is not being met in the most important intimate relationship that you have. So,
Yeah. Yeah, it's tricky. So when like you were saying like the boys growing up now, like we're hopefully going to raise them in a better kind of situation about all these emotions and feelings and things. What do we need to do for people who have already been programmed to think that way?
it's I mean, well, that's what I coach people on. So, there's that. But there's really, it's about starting to advocate for yourself. And, I think that the simplest way to start changing that for somebody who has been so conditioned to not ask for help is to start exposing themselves to more people who have suffered, for one, with like any sort of struggles. Like for you, people and other people like you who I know who have spoken openly and vulnerably about their own history with just mental health and struggles, like that is a lighthouse for other people who are struggling and have not yet felt like they can reach out, because it's seeing examples such as yourself who have said, I'm a man and I have experienced this and I've gone through this. And, it's okay to get support. The more people that men can expose themselves to hearing encouragement for getting support, the better, because then it starts to like take that shame away from it.
Hmm. Yeah. My goal has always been I want to get to a point where like me sharing my story isn't a big deal. You know what I mean? Like,
Mhm.
because when I
Mhm.
first opened up, and like even now, like it's only been a year and a half, but I still get that. Like, I love the reaction. Of course, I'm not taking any. Like, I appreciate you saying that. I'm not taking anything away from that. But my intent is like one day, like I don't get those responses anymore. You know what I mean? Like, I want
That it becomes normalized.
exactly. Yeah, I want those responses. I appreciate them. I love hearing them. But I want to get to a point one day where it's like, yeah, so do I, and like we can all relate to it because everyone goes through something.
Yes.
It's just a matter of opening up that wall.
Yes.
So that's always been my goal. I always want to get to a point where I'm not that special.
Yeah, but it starts with this, because there aren't enough people talking about it right now. So it will get to that point, but that's why we have to keep talking about it and having these conversations. And I don't mean talking specifically about your journey, but I mean having these open conversations about, encouraging men to get support and reach out and that, like, exactly like you said, everybody goes through shit, but it's varying degrees of shit. And, a lot of times what happens and keeps people from reaching out too is, um, again, that comparisonitis and, thinking like, which perspective, I mean, listen, we need perspective. Perspective is something that will help sort of temper the degrees of whatever it is that we're going through. And, to realize like, okay, I still have so much to be grateful for because this person over here is going through this. But not not using that to the degree where it invalidates what we're feeling, because pain is relative. And so, yeah, I may not be triggered by the same things as somebody over here, but that doesn't mean that it's any less challenging for them. So, I think that that is a part of what keeps people from reaching out as well.
Well, that's huge, right? That's a big reason why I didn't, and it's because my situation at home, like my parents got a divorce, like you hear that so often now, and there's a question I want to get about that later. But in terms of living situation, in terms of friends, in terms of education, in terms of health, I've been lucky. Like I've like the one of the best situations you can have. So when I was going through, suicidal thoughts and wanting to die. I hated myself. I hated who I was. There was always that, like, I wanted to reach out. But then I thought, like,
Mm.
but I shouldn't feel that way because I've got everything going for me. Because I was in university. I was, like, on the swim team. I mention that every episode. So the viewers have to listen. I was on the swim team. Like, my grades were shit, but, like, I was still in a university level school. I had a great family who like supported me every step of the way. I had great friends. So I was like, there is nothing that gives me the right to feel that way when like you look at the news and people are starving in Africa. I was
Mhm.
like, how can I feel that way when I've got such a great life? And that like that's what holds a lot of people I know back because they're going through these rough stages and I'm like, you got to open up. You got to like let someone know and they're like, I can't feel that way. I shouldn't feel that way. So they just invalidate how they're feeling and it just digs them deeper into that hole.
Mhm. Yeah, there's so much guilt. There's so much guilt and feeling like I have no right to feel this way when this is happening over here. But those are all external circumstances. And so it is important to be wary of the external circumstances that are different from other people's that contribute to their varying degrees of struggles. But there's also so much internally that's going on that nobody can dictate what's going on internally with me, because a lot of times when you start asking yourself, um, why am I feeling this way? Like, we can't answer for that selves a lot of times. We don't even know what's happening internally. But a lot of that, whatever it is, comes from a lot of, traumas we not may not even be aware of from our early formative years. All of that stuff gets imprinted in us by the age of like 7 or 8. And then that informs our experiences and our perspectives and our choices as we go through life. And we not may not be conscious of it. So we might be having some sort of, internal crisis, and we can't access where that is stemming from unless we do a lot of work. So we can't, while we can look at the external circumstances of ourselves compared to other people and be appreciative, and I think that that's one way of like really sort of coping to move through it is recognizing, when we do have that sort of um advantage, but we cannot compare internal struggles because again, a lot of times like we don't even know right off the bat like what's causing it for us. So who are we to judge that our internal struggle is less than somebody else's?
Mm, yeah. All the success in the world can't fix that chemical imbalance in your brain.
Right.
So yeah, it's all relative. I know like that whole you were mentioning about how social media gives you that whole grass is always greener kind of concept. And like like with Facebook you see it with all the social media like Tinder has a world version now where you can just see matches from other countries. So
Oh my.
it's literally like the grass is always greener. You've always got that mentality. So that definitely plays a role in it too.
Hmm.
Um Oh, I was gonna ask. Yeah, so we already mentioned about like the strains in marriage and why that statistic says that married men with kids are usually the category with the least amount of touch.
They're the loneliness.
Sorry.
The population that has the highest reported levels of loneliness.
Yeah. So going on the other side of that, I wanted to talk about guys and their friends. So
Hmm.
when let's say you have a girlfriend, okay, and you're very you treat her well. That's the only way I can put it. You're like, I love my girlfriend, and like you spoil her and you do these things. Why is that considered gay? And I'm not saying gay people are bad, but why? But why, when you're treating your girlfriend well, people go, "Are you gay? Like, why are you treating her like that?"
Who says that?
Like kids, like when you're like, "I love my girlfriend," they're like, "You're such a little bitch." Like
Mm,
why? Like
mm.
why are you showing so much emotion towards this girl? You gotta like shut it down. You gotta be a man. And like I said, I'm not nothing against gay people, but like why is there that label of being weaker or like more of a sissy for showing that towards someone you care about? And it goes with friends too. Like if I give my friend a hug now, it's fine. But like if I gave my friend a hug in elementary school, I'm getting bullied for a week.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, you said it a second ago, and it's that showing emotion.
Mm-hmm.
It all comes back to showing emotion is something girls do. That's not something that guys do. And that comes from that, conditioning from childhood that it's just like boys are tough, boys play sports, boys don't do dance, boys don't do art. It's like all of those more like creative and expression, forms of expression sorts of activities, anything that is emotional is associated with being a girl. And so it doesn't matter if you're showing that emotion towards a girl, you're showing emotion, and that is weak because you're supposed to have her begging for you, right? I mean, like boys, part of that conditioning also is that, and this is like, again, like such a problematic thing, but that, a boy, young man who has a lot of sexual partners is like, "Yeah, bro, what's up?" Like, "Oh my God, you're revered and hailed and like put on this pedestal." However, a woman who has a lot of sexual partners is promiscuous and a slut and a hoe and all of these things, right? So we associate men to being like power. And so in relationships, that means you're supposed to be in charge. You're not supposed to be jocking for her. She's supposed to be jocking for you. So if you're showing emotion and like doing all these things for her, then that often implies that maybe she's taking advantage of you, and taking advantage of being spoiled and all that emotion and taking you for granted. And you're going to get your heart stomped on, which again, vulnerability equals death, right? Like having your heart broken is is the thing when it comes to showing that emotional vulnerability. And it goes back to that danger zone. Like if you show weakness, you are putting yourself in a position to be killed or like severely harmed. And so for boys who grow up with that super hyper, masculine picture of what it means to be a boy and what it means to be a man, that's what they're building on, and that's their lens. So, and a lot of times what's interesting too is that they may not even necessarily believe that when they're saying that to you, but it's because they haven't been able to access those emotions for themselves that they're just sort of perpetuating that story and that narrative because that's what they know, even though they would love to have somebody to spoil and, feel in love with and want to take care of, and do all these things.
Yeah. It's also that like pack mentality where like if everyone around you saying it,
Yes.
you're like, well, I don't want to be with the one individual that's getting picked on.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah, no, I do hope the kids growing up are taught different because like you see it all the time like cuz I was a camp counselor in the summer and like you see it like when a kid cuz I was always that super emotional kid like always I watched Disney princess movies all the time cuz I freaking loved it. I wanted to be that prince.
Which one's your favorite?
Oh jeez.
Which prince would you be?
Oh, that's a tough one. I'm trying to think of all the princes. Because you always get that question like which princess do you like, but I've never gotten the prince
Mm.
question. Mm,
Well, I mean, okay, so let's go there. Which princess was your favorite?
oh man. Okay, so my top three. Uh,
You've got a list.
I've got oh, I just had this conversation. Who was my number one? My number one was I think it was Jasmine. Jasmine's my number
Okay.
one. Mulan's my number two, and she's tied with Rapunzel because I love both of them. And
Okay,
then
we got a tie.
number three is Meg because I love her sassiness.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think as a prince, I'd like to be like Aladdin or something. I don't know, super down to earth.
Yeah.
Hercules too because he's super jacked, and that men's mentality in me is like I gotta be that guy. But I think those are the two. The other ones like Sleeping Beauty's prince and like Cinderella's prince. They're like
Uh,
such like behind the scene characters. Man, the
yeah.
queen takes the show there. Like you don't want to be them. Like they don't do anything. They're like that stupid stereotypical blonde. I'm blonde too, but like stereotypical blonde strong guy who doesn't really think much. He's like, oh, I gotta save the princess. Like I don't want to be that guy. Nah.
I love it. I love it. Thank you for answering and playing along.
Of course. Yeah. Um yeah. Oh, I do hope it gets better. And I think it will. I mean, I'm having more conversations about men feeling now than I've ever had. Like growing up, I never had a role model to like talk about feelings with. Um I was on teams, I was in school and no one did it. Like no one. I was even in university. Like my last year of swimming was last year and I was the first person as a captain to open up ever.
Mhm.
Like it will get better. I have hope that it will, but Yeah.
When you were starting to say about being a camp counselor, and I derailed you with the Prince question.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Wow, look at me being a great host, just going on a tangent.
I got you. I've got you.
Thank you. What I was saying was like even now, like I would camp counsel like 8-year olds, 10-year olds, like these younger people. And if there was like, it's like shark smelling blood. If one kid was too emotional or he cried one time because something rubbed him the wrong way, he got attacked. Like
Mhm,
immediately, it's like, look at this little pussy ass bitch. I don't even know how they know those
mhm,
words. You're 8 years old, but they just attack that person. It's like wolves when a deer is limping. They're like, "Ugh," they like go
yeah,
for it and like attack him like that. So I mean, I do hope it gets better. I mean, even at that young age, and then okay, this is another tangent, but you tell the parents, you're like, listen, there was a kid crying today, and your son like attacked him for it, like bullied him about it, and they're just like,
mm,
kind of reaction is that? They're like,
mhm.
oh, that's just Nick. Well, Nick's an asshole. As a counselor, you can't say that.
Right.
Like I had those thoughts all the time, but you just got to sit there. Yeah, I mean, Nick's just Nick, man. But like it starts with the parents. It starts with
Absolutely.
everyone in that circle that kid's
Mm,
growing up in, because that kid wasn't born like that. No
mhm,
kid is, well, maybe some, but like the majority of kids aren't born like that. We're pretty open, we're pretty accepting. It's the same, like,
mhm.
I don't even want to go down this rabbit hole, but like if you talk about racism, no kid's born racist.
Right.
That's brought in through
Yes.
nature and nurture, like your environment, the people you're growing up with. But it's the same thing with like emotions for men, and like being able to be open and accepting other people's emotions. It's like it's grown up with you.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. And it's something, when I've done connection workshops before, part of what I talk about is empathy for the people who raised us, because it does come from who we were raised from. And there's a trap in there's a trap in blaming our parents for, or blaming other people's parents for why so and so, why Nick is the way that Nick is. Um, but it's like this onion that we need to keep peeling with empathy and thinking about, okay, but we don't know the house the Nick's parents were brought up in. And maybe they're doing a shit ton better than what his parents went through as a child. And so when we are able to like really take a step back from judgment of anybody and just think, okay, I'm seeing one piece of this puzzle and there's like so many factors that, go through all this stuff. And, even maybe with next parents, it's like at home, maybe they laughed in front of you because they didn't want to indicate, that they know their failings as parents. Or maybe because there's always a defense mechanism, especially when you're talking to somebody about their parenting skills, like the defenses go up. So it could have just been that. And it's something that they're addressing at home, but like you're an outsider, so they don't want to give you that lens. Or maybe they're gonna beat the shit out of Nick when they get home because they're like, "What are you doing?" Da, da, da. And that's why Nick is, a bully and attacking this kid. So it's like we never know what's going on. Um, but if in those moments, and this is without any judgment for you having that reaction to them, like, like, well, Nick's an asshole. Like, yeah, that would be my thought too. but it's part of really starting to cultivate deeper, more meaningful, heartfelt connections with people is like when we start to feel triggered by something somebody else does, whatever it is, even if it wasn't directly related to us, and that's not saying that we should condone anything by any means. I want to make that clear. If we see something really wrong, it's our job to speak up and advocate on the person's behalf if they are not able to advocate for themselves. But also just seeing, in some situations where it's less severe and less extreme of circumstances, just that like, okay, there could be something else going on there that I know nothing about, and I don't know what their childhood was like back and back and back, and all of that. But I 100% agree with you that family and that community that we're born into has so much influence and impact on how we view other people and how we view ourselves, and all of that neural wiring that gets really set in by the age of like 7 or 8.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a complicated. Life is literally an onion. It's so complicated. There's so many freaking factors. Shrek got it right. We're all just ogres with different onion layers. That's all it is. Like we've mentioned, I am hopeful. I know this. Like I say this often. Like what I said about the pandemic and like the lack of touch and how we're gonna be struggling for a while. I say that often, but I it always leaves a bad taste in my mouth because I love giving people
Mm.
hope as opposed to like we're doomed.
Yeah, yeah,
But I do believe there is hope because there's a lot more conversations like the one we're having. People are opening up more. Like there is a better sense of like the sense of community is a little hindered right now, but there is overall a better sense than even when I was growing up, like 5, 6, 7 years ago. Um, it is getting better, and it's just a matter of the people listening or people who even aren't listening. Just like talk, be
yeah.
open, man. It's hard.
And be curious.
Be curious. Yeah, have an open mind. Like that's another big thing, and that goes for anything in life. Like just
Yes.
have an open mind. Like I was fortunate as a kid growing up where I was exposed to a bunch of things early on, so my mind has always been relatively open. But that's another thing is that kind of rubs me the wrong way when people go, you're so open minded." That rubs me the wrong way because it's like, shouldn't we all be? Like,
Yeah,
I don't want to be like, wow, like because I'm accepting and I want to learn about things. That's what everyone should be like. I
yeah,
don't like when people think I'm special for that because I'm not.
yeah. I see what you're saying with that it shouldn't be this like wondrous unicorn thing for you to be an open-minded person.
Like wow, you're not close minded about religions and cultures. No, of course I'm not. Like what the hell? I want to learn about them if they're out there.
Yeah,
It's like yeah. So I honestly think social media has hindered things a little, but I do think that having that ability to be exposed to different cultures and different religions and different people around the world can have a good impact
absolutely. 100%.
because we're way more exposed and open-minded than ever before.
Mm.
I've mentioned this before too. I knew people who grew up in a town where there was no one but white people, like nothing. And then they would go outside of their town and they were like, "What the fuck is this? There's like different people." But now even those towns, if you've got an internet and you've got social media, you're exposed to it, which I think can have a good impact.
Can, but cannot. Yeah, because everything gets so twisted. And so, you're depending on what you're looking at, you're getting a um, very agendized view of, this exposure.
That's the other thing, right? Like
Hmm.
social media can be great, but then there's like all these rabbit holes you can fall down into, and it's like,
Even just with the news, you don't know what news channels
who
to
do you
to listen
trust?
to.
Like, who do you
Right.
trust? Because everyone's got their own agenda. But if you just take everything in, have a grain of salt for everything, keep your open mind, and then move forward, I think you'll be okay. It's the people who take everything to heart. They read the headlines, they don't read into it. They just take it everything to heart, and then they get sensitive about things. That's when it gets a little hairy. Hey, that's my name. But I do believe that we're going in the right direction. It's just a matter of more guidance and like more conversations, more repetition. I'm gonna repeat this stuff till I die if it doesn't get into people's heads because yeah, we're going in the right direction. It's just a matter of keeping going.
And having safe spaces to talk about the things as people are becoming more exposed to them. Because I think part of that too is, you know, okay, we're taking in a lot and then we're processing it through those structures and neural pathways that we grew up with. And it may close us back down because this experience we had when we were 6, taught us like, oh, well, that's actually not the case. Even though it's being presented to me and I'm trying to be open-minded, my experience is telling me that this is a lie. So it's having that exposure to different experiences and people and cultures and everything. Um, that's step one, but also, having conversations with other people and, not even necessarily people outside of your comfort zone. Just start with having conversations with people inside your comfort zone to start having those dialogues and get curious again, like the getting curious and, you know, we learn from other people and depending on who's in your comfort zone it could do more harm than good, you never know, but it could also sometimes through talking through things with people you start to realize what you actually believe about something, and it could be new information and you might surprise yourself, like you might find yourself like defending somebody who you wouldn't have otherwise thought that you would defend, but in having this conversation and being curious with somebody you realize, no, but actually, XYZ, and you go, oh, and so that's like sort of like slow trajectory to that open-minded sort of place. And yeah, because it's not enough to just like take it all in because of the way that we internalize when it's just us processing.
Yeah. One of my best examples of that for me personally, just from my life, is um because I love basketball. Like that's the one. I'm a swimmer, but like I would much rather watch basketball. But the like Jimmy Butler, he's on the Miami Heat now, but when he was on the Timberwolves, there was this idea that he was a very toxic player
Mm.
to his teammates because he was very tough. Like he was very, I want to win, and you guys aren't working out or getting ready the way that a winner would. Like he had that tough love mentality, but because of that, it was rubbed the wrong way, and news articles and news outlets all over were calling him like a locker room cancer. So he had this
Wow.
idea around him, and I had never seen him play. I just heard the articles. I was like, wow, that guy's kind of a dick. And then he went to Miami and freaking thrived because everyone there had that same mentality that he did.
Mhm.
And it turned out, wow, he's actually a pretty good teammate. It's just his way of working wasn't being uh, his other teammates weren't responding well to it. So he's actually not a locker room cancer. He just didn't vibe very well. And like the news kind of warped it into this story that would get a bunch of clicks. So
Oh
then you
yeah,
start to realize, oh, maybe I judged too early. It's like that. Like I had
absolutely.
been so close minded about that story, and I knew a lot of people who did too. And when he went to Miami, a lot of people were like, "That's the end. That's it. Miami's gonna it's gonna be the same thing."
Mm.
So there's a lot of NBA players like that, but that's the one that kind of came to my mind is like, there's just this narrative that isn't true. It's just interpreted the wrong way.
Yeah, that's such a great example too. And it's also an example of, finding your people. And it sounds like his agent and his manager, knew clearly who he was and saw that real potential for him. But they knew that he was not in an environment where he was going to thrive because he just didn't mesh with the style of the other people on that team. And so, it's a good example of having the right people around you who know you, that are in your inner circle that you can trust and, overcome, especially in public light, a lot of detrimental ratings sort of propaganda.
My favorite story of his is when he was on the Timberwolves. He was trying to prove a point that they weren't ready to win. So what he did was he played a scrimmage game and he took all the bench players and faced the starters and he won. It's my favorite.
Wow.
He's like, you guys don't want to win, and he proved it by playing with people who were like bottom of the bench, like back, and he played the stars of the team, and he won. Like that. That's my favorite story because it's just like it puts
Wow.
them like it's kind of like a "see, I told you" moment. But then, of course, the news kind of got to it, and we're like, "He's such a cancer." But
Yeah.
it's all about being open minded. Um, and I think we're getting there. I mean, obviously, there's going to be a couple bumps in the road, but I mean, we're way more open minded now than even like 5 years ago. So
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Still have a long way to go. Baby steps.
yeah, baby, that's it, right? It's just the small victories.
Yeah.
Yeah, the long way to go. Jesus. Uh, I still get that a lot where it's like, oh, are you gonna cry? Are you a little baby? Because you told your
Mm.
story. I'm like, okay, like it just kind of puts into perspective. You're like, yeah, we still have a long way to go with these closed-minded little people. Um, yeah, and if you're one of those people who gets those comments, like you can't take it to heart. Like it's hard, and especially now, like with social media, that's kind of what I want to close off on. But like with social media, like you get these people who are behind a screen and they feel very tough. They've got this extra um, sense of macho ness, I guess, because they're behind a screen, and you're like sense of security. I'd go with because what you're not going to do anything to them. You don't know where these guys live. You don't know anything about them, so they can say whatever they want to. So they just unleash all these nasty things. And it's hard not to take it personally, but you got to remember, like, these guys are never going to say that to you to your face. And like if they're taking time out of their day to like go, oh, you're gonna cry about it, like there's something else going on there.
Yes.
Like no one who has a great environment and great mental space, no one who's in that situation is gonna go on YouTube and comment like, look at this little ugly bitch ass boy. Like you can't take it seriously. And I've struggled with it, but like it's hard. But you got to remember that they're probably struggling too.
That's it right there because they're in a safety bubble and I don't know if you're very familiar with Brene Brown's work, but she shares that Teddy Roosevelt quote all the time. It's what she's known for about being in the arena and these people who are sitting behind their computer screens and you know, they're not in the arena and there's probably a lot going on there, like you said, that limiting beliefs and circumstances and, so many other things that are keeping them from putting themselves in the arena. And so they're coming down on people who are paving that way. And, it's hard not to take it personally. I totally understand. And that's a fear with being somebody who starts to speak out and openly about anything, whether it's about one's own mental health journey or if it's putting any sort of anything into the world where you're becoming, a public sort of person. Um, that's the hard thing, but it's, setting those boundaries and taking that step and, it goes back to having that like sort of empathy and just thinking like, okay, this really isn't about me at all, and this is about something going on with them. And it becomes a lot easier to sort of like let go of and move on from when we realize this is not about me. And, they're doing it a lot of times because they admire what I'm doing and they don't feel like they can do it for themselves.
Yeah, right.
And it doesn't always feel that way, of course, but it's something to sort of like try to reframe.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. So if you're like struggling to open up, and this is kind of why I like, other than the comparison, um, is like, you were worried like people are gonna judge me, people are gonna laugh, and like there's a lot of people I know and like people that my friends know who are worried about that, which is why they don't open up, and it's kind of eating away at them. So if they're listening, like just do it. Like a lot of the like most, even if in your close circle there's no one, there's always someone who will listen and who appreciates you opening up.
Mhm.
And like I've mentioned this before, but like when I opened up, I had a great group of friends, and I still believed like no, everyone's gonna laugh at me, but like there's always someone who's like, I appreciate you saying that, and I'm here for you.
Mm,
So once you get
yeah.
that, like opening up is easy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And something that I heard recently that really resonated with me is, another reason why we often don't open up when we're going through stuff, and I'm guilty of this myself. I withdraw, I retreat when I'm going through a cycle. And a big part of it for me is feeling like I don't want to burden somebody else, and so that whole burden thing is a big, big piece of it. And what I heard recently that really resonated with me is we are actually doubling the burden on our loved ones by not opening up and asking for help because they know that we're struggling, but we're taking away the ability for them to support us and be there for us. And so it's actually doubling the burden because they don't know what they can do, if they can do anything, but they clearly see that there's something going on. So so it was just kind of an aha moment for me to think of it in those terms, that like I think that I'm saving people, the trouble by doing the work myself and going through it on my own, when in reality it's putting the burden even more on them because they don't know what to do.
Yeah. Yeah. And I completely agree. That thought's going through every person struggling's head. I don't want to be a burden.
Mhm.
And I was there too. Like when I was going through the worst parts, I was like, I don't want to bother anyone with it. But like the amount of strain I put on my girlfriend at the time and like my friends at the time, like, well, my ex girlfriend, but like just the amount of strain I would put on because everything was boiling under the surface and I would just lash out and like, as opposed to going to get help and like making everything easier. So if you do believe like you're gonna be a burden, you're not. It's just
Mhm.
it's and it's easier said than done because like we can tell you all day every day that you're not going to be a burden and people are going to appreciate you opening up, and it's only until you believe that it can happen. But if repetition is what you need, I'm just going to say it again, like you're not going to be a burden and people are going to appreciate you opening up.
Yeah, because that drives connection. When you're authentic and vulnerable with somebody, it allows people to feel closer to you, and it also encourages them to be authentic and vulnerable in return. And it builds that like web of safety and trust because there's a mutual vulnerability going on. And so if you just have one person that you feel that level of safety with, that you can say, "Hey, I need to talk. Are you available for that?" And and I also suggest um being clear about what you need in that moment when you do feel ready to open up and talk and say, because a lot of times this is the other reason. This is another thing that keeps people from reaching out, is that we don't want to be we don't want to be met with solutions or advice or toxic positivity or, like, at least this, we want somebody to hear us. We want to feel seen. We want to be able to share what's going on and just have that be received. And so that it's like purging it and getting it out, right? Because once you like get it out, it takes the power away from it. It takes the shame away from it. So I also invite people to, when you do get that conversation started with somebody that you feel that safety and trust with, and say, I really need to talk. Are you available for that? Set that expectation and that boundary at the beginning of the conversation. Say, I really, you know, I love you and I appreciate that you are going to, want to help in some way. And that's not what I'm needing in this moment. If that's not what you're needing, if you want advice or suggestions or like tips for finding a therapist or something like that, say that. But if you don't, be clear about that so that you don't end up feeling further shut down because you start going into this vulnerable story and somebody cuts you off and is like, "Oh, but da 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 da. Oh, you can do this. Oh, I know somebody who did this and it totally changed things around for them." Because that's not gonna help you, and that's gonna make you feel even more invisible because they're not seeing you. So just to set that boundary at the beginning of the conversation, say, "This is all I need. I just need to, like, say this and get it out, and, please receive it, and that's the best way that you can support me right now."
Yeah, 100%. Great advice. Are you a football fan?
49ers.
49ers? Who do you got winning the
Yes.
Super Bowl? This is going to come out later, so it might not age well, but who do you have winning?
Okay, full disclosure. I am a diehard 49er fan, but otherwise I don't really watch football or follow it too much. Although I do generally watch the Super Bowl. I don't even know who's playing this year, to be totally honest. Now, ever since I moved to the East Coast, I've fallen out of touch with my Niners because they don't play those games on the local channels here. So I don't follow it as much, but so I don't even know. Tell me who's playing and I'll tell you my pick.
You got the Bucks and the Chiefs. Like the
Chiefs.
the Buccaneers, sorry, and the Chiefs. Yeah.
Yeah, Chiefs. I'm going Chiefs.
Chiefs? Perfect.
Yep.
Shout out to Patrick Mahomes. If you want to come on the show, I will gladly have you on. No, but that's everything. Rachel, thank you so much for joining me today. This was a lot of fun. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Harry. It's been a blast talking with you, and I really appreciate the space to share how important it is for anyone to seek support, and particularly men who have less access. So thank you. It's been such a joy.
Of course. And to all my viewers, I will see you guys next time. Hey guys, thanks for watching another episode of my show. If you want more episodes of the H Panel, the button's going to be right here. If you want to subscribe for more videos from myself, it'll be right down below. Please like, comment, share, give 5 stars. Let's keep this conversation going, guys, all right? I'll see you next time. Thank you for your support.